My name is Ann Phelim.
And I'm Phelim Scoop, and we're here to tell you about our really exciting new project. It's coming out on Monday, the 9th of December. We're getting Adam Baldwin to narrate the Inspector General's report, actor Adam Baldwin, and we're going to release it as a podcast. This is the first time anything like this has been done. You're going to hear the full Inspector General's report. This is a report that's going to tell you the truth about what Comey did behind closed doors, what Strzok and Page did behind closed doors, how they set up the fake Russia collusion story, how they set up the fake investigation. And the way that you can find this is to sign up right now so that we can get this to you the second that it drops. Hear the IGreport.com, HEAR. Hear the IGreport.com. Sign up right now and we will send this to you on Monday. Adam is also an award-winning narrator of books. He's an award-winning narrator of books for Audible. We couldn't have a better voice. This is the guy that you want to hear, and you'll get to hear this on your commute, on your bus journey. You'll be able to hear this on the podcast. So sign up right now to hear the IGreport.com. You're going to hear this report unfiltered by the mainstream media. So there's not going to be anybody telling you what's important, what's not, hiding the truth from you. You're going to be able to hear the report in full, read by Adam Baldwin. It's just going to be a pleasure. Yeah, it's great to release it. We're excited to do it. It's great to bring the truth to people. So sign up right now at heartheigreport.com and let's get the truth out there. We're here in Trump Hotel, Washington, D.C. We're going to go now and interview Mollie Hemingway, a senior editor at the Federalist. She's going to tell us what's going to be in Monday's Inspector General's report, what's not going to be in the Inspector General's report, what's significant, what's not. We're also going to discuss her book on Brett Kavanaugh and his hearings. We're going to talk about Trump derangement syndrome and so much more. So let's go to Mollie Hemingway now. Let's talk to her about what's important and the Inspector General's report on Monday. Hello, this is Phelim Scoop.
And this is Ann Phelim, and this is the Ann Phelim Scoop. And we're very grateful to be here at the Institute for Energy Research. We're stealing their facility today to interview Mollie Hemingway, our dear guest. Great to be here with you.
So thank you for coming, Mollie. Outside, it's Washington, D.C., and we're here. And I'm very, very pleased to be interviewing Mollie, who's a great journalist. I'm sure everyone out there knows who she is, but for those who don't, she's a journalist, columnist, New York Times best-selling author, senior editor at the Federalist, Fox News contributor. She most recently would be known for her book, Justice on Trial, The Kavanaugh Confirmation and the Future of the Supreme Court, a New York Times best-selling book. She was one of the original Russia skeptics, as in she was always skeptical of the whole Russiagate story. And was proven correct, and for 2 or 3 years constantly wrote and constantly pointed out the inadequacies in the story and the inadequacies of journalism, and was proven right.
So it's very timely actually that we're meeting you right now, because we're basically on the eve of the IG's report, so we're going to be talking a lot about that today. Great.
She's long been a media critic in the sense of examining how the media cover stories. Famously, you've been well known for covering how the media cover religion.
Yes.
And hopefully we can get onto it later. It's one of my favourite journalistic stories, the Crow's Ear Gate. Yes. it's just actually, and I love the way you covered it too, because I remember you writing about it, and it was one of my favourite things you've written was that the New York Times was covering the funeral of Pope John Paul II, and they said he was lying in his coffin with his crow's ear, CROWSEAR. Now, this he wasn't. He was lying in. He was lying with a crow's ear, which is the staff that the Pope has, the shepherd's staff, and obviously the New York Times journalist didn't know what a crow's ear was.
Yeah. And not just that they didn't know what it was, but even years later, after having countless people let them know,
they still have not.
No, I checked it this morning. It's still there. No, but actually, fully, the thing that I really liked about your journalism on it, because normally, when I said media critic, people think of this, mainstream media is biased and all this. You wrote in the Federalist, it still hasn't been corrected, and part of me hopes it never will be. And, I get that. It's like, it's just wonderful. And, let's not get all up on our high. Let's just enjoy the absurdity of it. So, I mean, let's start with Russiagate. basically, why were you a Russia skeptic? Why?
Well, believe it or not, I actually was not a Russia skeptic at first. I think I was a Russia believer for a very short period of time. I thought it was crazy that Donald Trump was doing so well in the Republican primary. I was reading things that suggested that this was Russia-related, and I, for about a week, explored that. I looked into how all of his advisors did seem to have this different foreign policy attitude toward Russia. I knew that the trolls online were definitely a Russian troll factory. And I happened to talk to someone who just disabused me of the notion right away. He said, you're confusing a difference in foreign policy with a big conspiracy. And in fact, there are a lot of people who think that our foreign policy needs some updating from the post-World War II, global consensus. And he wasn't even particularly outside of that consensus. He just kind of explained to me who some of these people were and how they weren't the boogeymen that the media were portraying them to be. So I did have a very brief period, and I kind of like to just explore ideas sometimes just to do that. When Donald Trump won and when the Russia hoax really took off, I definitely was skeptical, just because I knew so many people who had voted for him, and it wasn't because of Russia. They actually had legitimate reasons for voting for him or voting against Hillary Clinton. And so few people in Washington, D.C. and New York actually knew anyone who had voted for him, much less, the number of people that they should have known.
Yes.
And so I definitely got skeptical there. And then the real thing that helped me was that I happened to have someone who was a perpetrator of the conspiracy reveal in my presence, stupidly, who one of his sources was. And when that happened, I realized, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And that gave me the confidence, because as you pointed out, people were very critical of anyone who was skeptical, but I had such good authority, ironically, one of the people who was perpetrating it, that it helped me be confident. And
Yeah, actually, that's a good point you made. I think Donald Trump has destroyed a lot of things in America, many of which needed to be destroyed. The White House Correspondents' Dinner, that's just one example. But he's destroyed the media. He hasn't destroyed the media, but he's destroyed this whole idea of anonymous sources. That they should be held up as and not questioned. And this idea also of an anonymous source, you often see this, a source close to the Trump administration, but that's not a proper source. And even as an anonymous sourcing, because there are people close to the Trump administration who are Trump skeptics, there are people who are Trump fans, or there are a senior Republican could be anyone from Steve Schmidt to Mike Pence,
right.
And to not give your anonymous sources a background,
motivation,
yes. Say who would be normally skeptical of this, or who would normally be cheerleading this, or whatever it is, that doesn't wash anymore.
Well, so ideally you wouldn't be using any anonymous sources. In this town, unfortunately, you have to use a lot of anonymous sources. It's just part of the culture if you want to be reporting on anything in the government. It's the overuse that is so disconcerting, and the fact that there's no accountability. Frequently, you get these explosive bombshell stories. Source close to the Trump administration says Putin really is controlling everything. And then the story falls apart, and then you can't hold anyone accountable other than the journalists. And I think journalists should have thought about that when they were just deciding to go for those easy clicks, that they were trading their credibility in the process. And you can't blame people. For years, month after month, week after week, there were these supposed explosive stories that showed that, in fact, there was treasonous collusion with
Bombshell.
Russia. And then when it all fell apart, and nobody took responsibility for it. Nobody's even written those pieces of, how did we get this story so wrong? How did we all get this story so wrong?
Actually,
how did people in Middle America know that we were full of it, but we didn't know it ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, you're correct. Those pieces are almost journalistic cliches now. After a big story falls apart, some grey-bearded journalist sits down, from a distance and wonders and ponders how they got it so wrong, and kind of promises that they won't do it again at the end. And
no longer,
and we've all a lot to learn, and it's and kind of blame the culture and blame everything, but not blame themselves, but do blame themselves and all. These pieces have not appeared,
and they also didn't really appear in 2016. I remember that Chuck Todd, who is such a clown at times, had this thing about how they couldn't afford to get some story wrong. I don't even remember what the story was, because they had previously gotten, I can't even remember what his example was. He had an example of getting some story wrong. Maybe it was the Iraq War or something like that. Can't afford to get another story wrong. He was saying this after the 2016 election, and it didn't occur to him that for many people, the way they covered that campaign was just an objective failure. It's not even that Trump won, although that makes it conclusive. Even if he hadn't won, even if just tens of millions of people had voted for him when they were pretending like that was something that nobody could do, that would have itself been a failure. But nobody said, how did we get this wrong? How did we get it so wrong? What do we do to improve it?
I think you make a very good point, though, about those people, those kind of experts and those kind of guys that are populating all our television screens, that they don't, it's like they never travel. It's like they never get out. It's like, they nearly need there needs to be some kind of like a tour organised for them, I'd love them to tour with me where I've been, to places I've been, where I have to say, actually, I got an education myself, which I'm humbled by. But I just think of and we tell these stories on the podcast a bit, but, places where I've been, we just think of one place we've been where somebody was incredibly generous to the Gosnell movie. As you know, we did the huge crowdfunding, and we ended up in this house with this man, devout Presbyterian, humble, sober, the kind of person, beautiful person, who lived in a very modest home, just a modest person. And we
who was a millionaire.
But lived a very modest life. And we went into his house, and he said, do you mind if we pray? And I have that happen all the time, right? But normally what happens is they say, because Anne is so fabulous, and Anne is so this, and Anne is so great. So I kind of put my head down and thought, here we go again, in a kind of a lovely, smug way. And the man said, as we do in this house every day, in the morning and in the evening, we will praise God and thank God that Donald Trump is our president. And I'm there with my head down thinking, God, does anyone know these people exist? And obviously I know now, they're all over the place. People like, these guys that you're talking about, they don't know that man exists, but they never bothered talking to him. And the likes of him, are everywhere. And he's just one. That's one type of person. But there's, obviously, But
the point then is, they still have no interest. Afterwards. And not only that, I remember after the election, I wrote a piece that never got published, but it was a satirical piece, right? I was kind of announcing, the way they announce changes in one of those little diary pieces, changes in personnel, and the New York Times hired the chief political correspondent from Politico. Politico hired the junior political correspondent from the New York Times. The Hill hired the person from the Washington Post. The Washington Post hired the person from the Hill. And the Politico switched. And every time they do it, this little bio, cover the 2016 campaign. Cover the 2016 campaign. And I'm going, you hired the person who covered the 2016 campaign for the Washington Post, and covered Washington, and it's like they got it all wrong, and your people got it all wrong. So what do? You hire someone from the other team who got it all wrong. Why did Why didn't you? Did you? They never think of hiring, who got it right. Right. Anyone who got it right.
Yes, some person down in Alabama who said it all along.
Well, there was people in D.C. who got it right. But they're not being hired. It was this musical chairs after the election of all the people who got it wrong.
Yes. And they gave each other awards for their coverage, too, even though it was demonstrably awful. There should have not just been the non-hiring of people who got it wrong or the non-promotion. They should have been bringing in other people. And they should have made whatever systematic changes they needed to make sure that in the future their stories wouldn't be so one-sided, so blind to what was going on. They didn't make any systematic changes. No. They didn't even try, and they didn't apologize. I always love it when Donald Trump says, the New York Times apologized, because they had a piece where they were like, well, I guess we have to admit we got it wrong. And it wasn't really an apology, so they always say, we didn't apologize. And like, you should just pretend that you did. It's actually better for you if you had in any way admitted error, that you totally did a disservice to your readers. Because the other thing is, for people on the right or people who aren't on the left, they had a real long period of time to get adjusted to Donald Trump. At first it's like, this can't be happening for some people. Some people like him.
Yes.
By the way, but then they could kind of go, okay, well, I talked to this reasonable person, and here's what that person was. And you had this slow transition. And for a lot of people on the left, and for a lot of people in positions of power, it happened within minutes. It happened in November.
It happened in November, whatever. True, actually.
And it's actually kind of shocking.
It's truly shocking.
So, and we're seeing the effects. That's no excuse for spending more than 3 years coming to terms with it. Maybe a month would be a maximum amount of reasonable time. But still.
People have gotten over, not to make fun, but people have gotten over the death of their husband quicker than some of these people, these operatives, have got over the fact that that Donald Trump is the president of the United States. It's almost like it's almost obscene. Like the grief period has gone on. There's that thing. I think there's that thing that gets said. By the way, it's like it's a little unseemly. Your grief is a little unseemly now.
Right.
And this is unseemly at this point and idiotic and unintelligible.
Well,
but it's quite funny.
Did they go through the 7 stages of grief?
Oh, Kubler-Ross or whatever her name was. Yeah.
Well, I don't know what they are.
I think they're definitely in denial. The anger and denial thing. No, they're stuck on that one.
There's
no acceptance.
No acceptance.
There's no acceptance.
Moving on. No.
So next week, as we know, on Monday, the IG's report is going to come out, and on the eve of that, like, what are your thoughts? When that hits all our desks on Monday morning, where are you going to there? Where are you looking? What are you looking for?
Or are you looking for anything?
Are you just looking for everything?
I'm one of those people who actually reads these reports, and I think there are very few people who actually read them. And I've read this Inspector General's previous reports on malfeasance at the FBI. So I feel that this is an informed speculation, also based on what little we know from leaks and whatnot, that it will be, like his previous reports, full of information about wrongdoing, but also not that harsh when it comes to accountability.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is partly a function of almost all Inspector Generals. I always say that they are like the HR department at a corporation. You think as an employee that they're there for you, but then you realize they're just there to serve the corporation. Inspector Generals exist to clean up problems at agencies. And so partly that might mean that you have to be honest. Okay, yes, this campaign was spied on with human informants and wiretaps and national security letters and overseas intelligence assets. But actually, if you look at it another way, it's okay, kind of thing. This Inspector General in particular has been very harsh about Comey and McCabe. I mean, he referred them for criminal prosecution. But again, for an issue of this scope, to spend as many years as he has on this, and to have, I think at best you're hearing rumors of 2 criminal referrals out of this. You could have gotten 2 referrals for something like, mismanaging your time card.
Yes.
So if you only have 2 criminal referrals, it suggests that this is going to be a cleanup operation. At the same time, I think we will get some actual facts that a lot of people, for some people who have given up hope of any accountability for this, they kind of just want to know what was going on.
Yes.
But having said that, even there, we won't get a full scope because Inspector Generals can only talk to people who are currently in the agency. So not only does that mean he can't talk to anyone at any of the other agencies that were involved, he can't compel their discussion, he wouldn't even go to talk to them. He can't talk to anyone who was fired or let go or anything like this, too, unless they cooperate of their own volition. So it's not a very powerful position in terms of gathering information. Also why I think it's been frustrating it's taken this long for a report to come together, given that he doesn't even have that much power. So limited in scope. Oh, the other thing is, this is really only supposed to be a look at FISA abuse, so that spy court abuse. And there's actually so much more than just the wiretap.
Yes, because there was, as you say, there was a human intelligence, was there a CIA agent sent to London?
Well, they had the original story made it seem like it was a CIA agent, although one of the leaks last week suggested that it was an FBI person. So, which is not supposed to be something you're sending overseas.
Yes. So there was, as you say, FISA may have been the gateway or a way in, but it wasn't the only way in at all by any means, because they were using human intelligence, they were using all sorts of other listening devices, etc.
Yes. So, I don't know. I kind of am worried it's going to be like the Comey situation. You remember when Comey totally ripped Hillary Clinton for her mishandling of classified information, but he was like, but
whatever.
We're not going to prosecute.
Yes.
And this guy seems to have a little bit of that attitude, a Comey-esque attitude of, okay, everything they did here was wrong, and people really have lost faith in the agency as a result. Oh, but it's also
fine
because
at the same time.
The fact of the matter is, unfortunately, and without reforms, it'll definitely continue to be this way, there is wide prosecutorial discretion at the Department of Justice. There's wide discretion in general about how you can handle a situation. You actually can, apparently, place spies on your political opponents' campaigns, and there's no rule against it. So if there's no law or rule against something, it's kind of hard to hold people accountable.
Yeah,
it's kind of an amazing scene. I mean, that whole scene of what happened in London, to me, it's I mean, clearly, obviously, we're in the movie making business, and the idea of the girl in the short skirt kind of thing, you know, without sounding too whatever, you know, but it's like, wow. I mean,
they sent a girl in a short skirt.
They basically sent a girl in a short skirt to a posh hotel, right? And the whole thing is like, oh, so 007 is true then, right?
Yeah, actually, funny you should mention this.
Oh, there you go, Phil.
This is my favourite T-shirt, which I've just got. It's the Thunderball. My friend Steve got me this. It's the poster from Thunderball. Which
Sean Connery.
Who
was the real 007.
Who was the real 007.
But it does, when I started reading through that stuff, it's like, oh my God, like they did do this stuff. They sent a girl with a short skirt,
and
right?
you first would hear some of these people who were caught up in the surveillance, they would tell stories like, and then there was a really pretty girl who I'm kind of suspicious about. And you go, oh, come on, like you weren't being targeted by the U.S. government. And then you're like, oh, okay, actually, yes, they did. They sent a pretty
and that
girl
she was like, and that she was like really nice. Like the whole thing was really funny, and that she was really, really nice.
Really interested in what he had to say.
But really interested in what he had to say, and kind of asking an awful lot of questions.
Yeah.
I just love that.
Yeah.
But
I mean, but also part of this is how the media will cover it, because you see, you know, you're correct. Comey was referred for prosecution, and you know, this thing that Lisa Page and Strzok were cleared in the last Inspector General, he slammed them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he said
they harmed the agents.
And also that he could not be sure that they were not free from political bias. He says that in his line. But the media has this line there, we're cleared in the last IG's report.
Right.
And it's like, so how the media cover this is going to be very important. And I think and
I think it's worth pointing out, the leaks that they have been complicit with say that this report is going to just clean them all up and everything was great. And so that's my standard. I'm going to look at this and go, is it true that this several hundred-page report completely exonerates everyone who perpetrated this hoax? I am suspicious about that. I'm not hopeful that it will be a really good report in terms of holding people accountable. I think if you don't clean up the FBI, it's really bad for the FBI. It's really bad for the country. It's bad for just people's trust in law.
Well, I have to say,
but their standard is complete exoneration, so that's what I'm going to look for.
I have to say, I've thought about this, you know, and I think about the FBI. You know, if you saw something suspicious down the road, or there was something, let's say your neighbour was carrying large boxes with explosives written on them, and you saw this, and then the FBI came to my door tomorrow, and said, "Would you help us?" I think I'd slam the door on them. I really would. I want nothing to do with these people.
It's interesting you say that, because, you know, and obviously, Molly, we were very delighted that you were able to come to see the FBI Lovebirds when we had it here in Washington, D.C. with about 500 people in the audience. And interestingly enough, and I don't know if I said that to you that night, but a gentleman came up to us and said, I'm an FBI agent. This is my daughter who's an FBI agent. And we just wanted to tell you, you know, we're disgusted. We're brokenhearted.
Yes.
We're brokenhearted. This is not what we got. I give my whole life. And I think he was just slightly retired maybe or something. And this lovely young woman that was with him, his daughter. But they were like, you know, kind of quietly saying, you know, we're with the FBI. People, the rank and file, like very disgusted.
So, living here, you know, a lot of FBI people, and I love them all. Some of them are some of my closest friends. I literally know one bad FBI person, and that person happened to be on the Mueller probe, which I just think is funny.
Oh, yeah.
It's so horrible, actually. But I wanted to say a comment about that Lovebirds thing, which I thought was interesting, related to Lisa Page's recent thing.
Oh, yeah. We need to add some new emails in there, by the way, some new text messages.
Yes. So she says she went to this hack reporter to give her story because she was so upset that Donald Trump had faked an orgasm.
Yes.
And I thought, like, what is she talking about?
Yes.
I'm pretty informed on this. I don't know it. And I was like, I hope she's not talking about that part where he kind of reenacts their emails.
Yes.
And in fact, that was clearly what she was referring to. And I thought, the only way someone could think this was a faked orgasm is not just because they are not knowledgeable about the issue, for lack of a better way of putting it, but also because they're not knowledgeable about those emails. They didn't realize that they did these gushy emails to each other where they would do this John and Marcia style, you know, repartee.
Peter, I love you're so smart. No, you're smarter.
But that's what I loved about that Lovebirds performance in D.C. was sometimes when you're doing live theater, the audience can almost drag it down. They don't respond. They're not in a good mood. And so much requires that interplay. That was one of the most well-informed audiences I've ever sat in. I was so pleased.
Yes.
I mean, they got every
I suppose
joke.
we better tell people, just anyone who doesn't. So the FBI Lovebirds undercovers, we took the text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and their congressional questions behind closed doors by Congress, and brought them all together, and only using verbatim testimony or the text messages made a play out of it. So it's a love story meets John le Carrier, meets madness and malfeasance in the FBI. And it may sound boring, some of these text messages, but these people were not boring, and what they were talking about was very serious and very funny. And we brought it to DC, and as you say, the audience were laughing at things that I
because we were worried. There were certain parts where it was like there was either like some heavy duty abbreviation, or there was these kind of, bureaucratic terms mentioned, and we're thinking, oh God, people aren't. And it's, of course, with that audience, they were like guffawing, like people were guffawing, people were doing this kind of stuff. They were like, people were going nuts because, of course, they, as you say, unbelievably informed of all of these.
Well,
issues.
and it's this weird disconnect. So you have people in the media who are so uninformed about the basics of the Russia hoax that they don't even know what other people are talking about. And then you have, like, if I go out and speak on a completely unrelated topic somewhere in the United States, people are like, okay, do you have any information on that September 27th meeting with so-and-so? And you're like, how do you know this stuff?
Yeah.
So people are informed, but they're not getting informed by traditional corporate media. And the corporate media are completely clueless.
They are completely clueless. And another thing about that, the FBI Lovebirds, was, as you say, the audience. I think conservatives in DC are under such pressure and regularly, they were so happy to be there that it was like, and they had permission to enjoy themselves and have fun, and they're normally the butt of jokes, and they were there, and they were you could just feel the stress lifting off everyone in that audience, and the joy.
I do go to a lot of theater. I love anything from like a one-person show to musicals or whatnot, and that was truly one of the best theater experiences I've ever had, and certainly the best in DC.
Thank you so much. And I love the fact that I remember talking to you about it, and obviously of that very informed audience, you were probably the most informed person there because you had read all the text messages.
I think everybody was like...
I don't know if they'd all read everything, which you had read everything, and I just remember you saying, I was sitting there and I was thinking, I really hope that they end with this one particular thing, which is exactly how Phelim chose to end it, which was, where she said, "Don't ever text me again."
Yeah, well, I'm one of my New Year's resolutions will be to revive FBI Lovebirds and bring it back, maybe to New York or DC.
Great.
And I think there's an audience for it here.
Yeah,
and
I think more people
actually,
want to see
just President Trump. So we filmed it and released it. By the way, you can see the play on, what's the FBI Lovebirds.com. FBILovebirds.com. You can see it stars Dean Cain, Christy Swanson. You can see that we filmed it 5 cameras. You can see the whole thing. And funny enough, it's had a huge uptick in the last few days of views, of course. So we released the trailer, and the president retweeted the trailer. And in the trailer is her saying, "Oh, Peter, I love you. Peter, I love you." Right?
Responsible for
and then he went to Minneapolis, wherever it was, the next day, and then basically started rehashing our trailer to the audience.
I was wondering about that. That's great. Okay.
So it's our trailer. He's actually so that got Lisa Page in the Daily Beast. Thank you you're welcome, Lisa, and you're welcome, Mollie. Let's talk now about your Brett Kavanaugh book and the Kavanaugh
and the whole Kavanaugh thing.
I do think there were people who remembered their history of Clarence Thomas, and there were people who weren't. The moment that the allegations came out, you had, among good faith people, you had people who were like, this sounds a lot like the Clarence Thomas thing, waiting until the confirmation hearings are done, last minute thing of like questionable provenance and no substantiation. And then there were other people who were like, well, we have to take this very seriously. So they were inclined to believe it almost before, and I do think it was that. Do you remember what they did to Clarence Thomas? And not just, that's sort of shorthand for so many things. Do you remember what they did to Bork or Rehnquist or a whole host of people?
My favorite fact about the Supreme Court is that if they had confirmed Robert Bork, there would now be a majority of Liberals on the court.
Wait, how so?
Bork died during the Obama.
Interesting. And this was the Bork seat that was just opened up.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, the great Irish American, who famously borked Bork, is now responsible for having a Conservative majority on the Supreme Court.
I think he deserves that.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. That is very interesting.
So,
Although who knows about the cases that Kennedy wasn't so great on, that Bork would have been better in the interim. But
yeah, true. So, if you want to get the latest up to date on Blasey Ford, Mollie's just written a piece for the Federalist, 21 reasons why you shouldn't believe Christine Blasey Ford, and it's about. I looked at it this morning. It's actually about 25. She puts 2 or 3 in. I think you didn't want to say 25 because you thought no one would read it, but there's in a few of them it's like you add in it's 2 or 3 reasons within the one.
It's overwhelming, by the way.
It's overwhelming.
It really is overwhelming.
I was just looking at all these people saying, "I believe Christine Blasey Ford." She's getting awards now, lots of acclaim, and I thought, but you'd never hear people explain why.
Yes. You can't say I believe. I believe the sky is orange, right? You have to say because.
Yes.
There is no such thing as I believe. It has to be because. There has to be a because.
Right. And nobody's ever asked to do that. And there are so many reasons why people do not believe her. I mean, my standard is, I am willing to believe anything. I just need to see the evidence.
Yes.
It's like the Russia thing. People would say, someday it's going to come out and you're going to look foolish. And I thought, well, if someone provided me evidence, I would change my mind on it. Until I get that, I'm not going to
Who was it that said, when facts change, I change my mind?
Yeah.
It's like, why? What do you do?
You have to start with a belief and then wait for
these people are actually saying, even if the facts change, I'm not going. I'm still going to believe her. Well, that makes you either dishonest or an idiot. So let's go back to your book, and actually, let's not. Let's go forward to the book that came after, which is the fun part. So Mollie wrote a best-selling book, the what's it called?
The Education of Brett.
The Education of Brett Kavanaugh. Sorry, I was getting
the second book.
Yeah. No, sorry, that's the second book. Your book is called
Justice
on Trial. The
Kavanaugh Confirmation and the Future of the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Apologies there for Phelim's notes.
No, my notes.
Put a little copybook and put away the copybook. You wrote your book. It became a New York Times bestseller. I loved it, and we recommended it to everyone on the Ann Phelim Scoop, and we sent you out an email with a link on it. I hope you all clicked on it and made it the best.
Did. That was amazing.
Right.
Thank you for doing
No problem. So then this other book came out, The Education of Brett Kavanaugh, and by 2 New York Times authors.
Yes.
And it's amazing what happened. And so they put an excerpt, as you would, they put an excerpt of the book into the New York Times, which is standard journalistic practice, excerpting a book. And it was about this new witness, a victim of Brett Kavanaugh, and how he had exposed himself to her and did all sorts of terrible things to her when he was a college student at Yale, was it? Yes. And, this was shocking, and it took off. And it was going to change how everyone viewed the hearings and how everyone viewed everything. And then there was a journalist called Mollie Hemingway who had not been provided with an advance copy of the book, but somehow got her grubby little journalistic hands on it. And I think I read you stayed up all of Saturday night reading this book and read that particular chapter that they had excerpted, which said there's this new victim. And at the end of that chapter was this bombshell piece of information that the victim herself, had no memory or no knowledge of this incident. No, not only did she didn't remember it happened, she didn't even remember anyone telling her it had happened after it had happened.
And somehow that didn't get put into their excerpt.
Yes, that was excluded from their excerpt.
But in the meantime, like this came out on Saturday. I got the book on Saturday and I read it through the night. In the meantime, you had every single Democratic candidate for the nomination calling for the impeachment of Kavanaugh. Or
quoting this.
Yes.
On this new information.
Did a lot of damage in the period of time before. And had we not acquired this book until it came out several days later, who knows how much more would have happened in the interim. But yes, they failed to mention that. They also failed to note that the person making the accusation was kind of a political opponent of Kavanaugh's.
Yes.
And that doesn't
a long-time political opponent.
And this is, again, just something that should be disclosed. It doesn't mean it's not true something.
Yeah,
yes.
But they had been at odds with each other going back to the 90s because they were on opposite sides of the Whitewater investigation.
Yes.
And this guy's wife had been nominated by Obama for a federal seat that she didn't get because of Mitch McConnell kind of stonewalling. And the woman who eventually took that seat was a very close friend, in fact, former girlfriend of Brett Kavanaugh's.
Yes.
Just, again, doesn't mean that
anything.
You can't include the allegation,
Yes.
but you have to mention these
Yes.
things.
Yes.
And they didn't think that was relevant.
And I used to be a print journalist, and obviously the first thing you do when you make a mistake is blame the sub-editors.
Good.
Because no one knows who they are, and they're these hairy guys who work down the back. As I used to say, what's a sub-editor? It's a guy who corrects other people's mistakes and drives home at night. Drives home in the dark, you know.
Drives home in the dark.
And they have these sad lives. They leave the office at midnight, you know. And back in Belfast, you couldn't even get a pint at midnight, like all the pubs were closed. It was very
They've
sad.
averted disaster for the paper, and then they get no.
Yes. Oh no, that's terrible. It's terrible. They avert disaster. But anyway, but they're also great for blaming, right? Mm-hmm. So you blame the subs put it in or took it out or changed the headline or whatever. So they blame the subs, the sub editors or the editors for taking this crucial bit of information that the victim, so-called victim, had no memory of this incident and never knew about it. They blamed the sub-editors. Then I was in my kitchen, and you wrote about this, and it really took off. And they blamed the subs, and that was fine. And then I happened to be in my kitchen in Venice, California, listening to NPR. Yes, this is the things I do for you. I listen to NPR people out there.
Yeah, we listen to it so you don't have to.
And these two authors, what's their names again?
Robin Pogrebin and Kate Kelly.
Kate Kelly were on NPR talking about the book. And the interview had been recorded the week previously, but we didn't really know that. And then they were asked about, were there any other victims? You know, and a kind of, I wonder. And that allowed them to go into an excited tones about this other victim. And again, they declined and refused and didn't mention that the victim had no memory of it.
They did exactly what they had done in their New York Times piece, but they had the benefit of having as much time as they possibly needed.
They could have easily made it.
And we know that they didn't say it and have it edited out by NPR because NPR actually went back and added a correction to the...
Wow.
Yes, but my point is NPR should not have run that interview. In the sense, you can't suddenly say this little bit shows problems with their credibility, but the rest of the interview is fine.
Right, like... In fact, one of the chapters that they wrote was a reference to one of the senators saying, if you're false in one thing, you're false in all things. And but they weren't applying that standard to themselves or whatnot.
Yeah.
I just want to point out, too, what they had there. You say they should have pulled the interview. That's true. Instead, they got this hour-long, or, something really, it was, I think, close to an hour.
Yeah.
Amazing interview where they got this nothing but a chance to sell their book.
Yes.
They were on every single network. They got reviews in all the major publications. It's just like another book that just came out by Ruth Marcus. Yeah. Reviews everywhere, major coverage in the New York Times, Washington Post, NBC, CBS, ABC, NPR, all the outlets.
These are all the places that also interviewed you then, Mollie, for your book. And just asking for a friend.
And we got none of that treatment at all. And what I also find interesting is that despite that, we far and away outsold these other books.
The book bombed. I mean, I don't want to say
their
book bomb, but I don't want to say that. I hope I didn't sound gleeful when I said that. Probably because I was gleeful. You never want someone's book to bomb, right? But why do you think it bombed? I mean, I know it's inaccurate. But it's super bombed. Not even liberals bought it. I think it sold like 2,000 copies.
I actually think that there is this disadvantage that the leftist journalists have. So, in fact, the whole reason we wrote the book was because these liberal journalists were getting contracts, and all the people who were involved in the process said, actually, it was a really interesting story how we got this over the finish line. We will never talk to these people. Like, we don't know anything else, but we will never talk to these people. We're worried our story won't get told. So it was almost like this organic thing that started. And we also knew whoever comes out first gets the bulk of the sales because if there is an audience of people interested in it, they're not going to read the third book. They're going to read the first book, the first good book on the matter. So we got that first capture. But also, I don't know if people love reading stories about defeat. And even though you could argue that the attacks on Kavanaugh served their purpose, the attorney for Blasey Ford said that she and her client were motivated by this desire to put an asterisk next to his name. Yeah. And they did. They for the rest of his life, even though there is nothing credible about it, he will be linked to a sexual assault. Yeah. They got what they wanted. But on the other hand, I think people probably feel really icky about what they did to get there. And so they don't love the idea of reading about it. The only thing that would have made a leftist book sell is if there had been any support for any of the allegations or any sort of any
documentation.
Yeah, and unfortunately for them, but
I mean, in fact, there was the complete opposite. There was lots of contemporaneous documentation to show that what was said wasn't true.
By the way, one detail that I just loved was, the fact that, he must be an incredibly unusual person, by the way, Brett Kavanaugh.
Goodness.
The fact, and I used to be a high school teacher, I've met some nerdy kids, but that there was a young man who was keeping this calendar saying who he'd met, where he'd been, and it's like, seriously, that is so sweet.
So bizarre.
But kept it. I don't know what age,
I do also have this thinking of, these are big political operations now, and so one of the downsides of President Trump putting out a list of nominees is they probably had a game plan ready to go on whoever the nominee would be, and it probably made sense in their mind, okay, we know this guy Brett Kavanaugh is a frat guy, he loves sports and beer, let's go after him on a Me Too thing, and it seemed like a great plan, except he happened to be incredibly decent with women, as every single ex-girlfriend attested. And I have this image of the day that the calendars come out, the team leading that oppo going, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
We picked a guy with calendars that can demonstrate what he was doing, who was at which party.
That's right. That summer he actually...
She couldn't even settle on which year it was, right?
But he knew where he was every weekend that whole summer.
Yes.
Right.
We're running out of time here, and I just want to do two things that we always do with all of our guests, which is ask them for a recipe that they're famous for at home.
Okay. I like to make enchiladas. So.
And you can?
Sure. They're easy. I'm not a good cook, but I can... but my sister gave me a cookbook that is like a Colorado-based cookbook, which is where we're from, and it has a great enchilada suizas recipe. So that's kind of my go-to
You'd
dish.
send it to us so that we can give it to the audience.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, great.
They're great. I love that.
And it's a family favorite, is it?
Yes.
You're famous for that. That's number one. Number two, then we asked...
You're going to say something else? Sorry,
were you going to add something to your food? Were you adding something to food?
No, it's fine. I also make green chili, but award-winning green chili. But I don't know if I could pass that recipe on.
No, by the way, that's a thing. That's a thing. That's the thing.
What's a thing?
People don't always share recipes, Phil. It becomes very kind of because.
Actually, we know someone who.
But I know somebody who doesn't as well.
No,
and because you become world famous for it, and then you give it away, and then people are like, "Well, I made that." And it's like, yeah, no, but I was famous for that before. So we do understand that. Second thing we ask people is there a mocktail, cocktail that they are famous for and or really enjoy or?
So I like Palomas. Do you know what Paloma is?
I don't know what a Paloma is.
So it's the most simple cocktail ever, and it can be fancied up, but tequila and grapefruit soda.
Oh, I love that.
But it's just like a refreshing...
I'm totally going to have that the next time on the podcast.
You can put some lime juice.
Beautiful idea.
Put some lime juice in there.
A grapefruit soda. You can buy a grapefruit soda?
Some people make it with grapefruit juice, but I like just the grapefruit soda.
Oh, I think that sounds great. Paloma.
And tequila.
I'm totally going for that. Okay, and the third thing that we ask people is a piece of art, a poem, a movie, a song that means an awful lot to them.
This is a good question, and it's a little hard to narrow down, but my husband and I have a very large vinyl record collection, and literally probably 4,000 or 5,000 albums, which we're trying to shrink. But I have several St. Matthew's Passion by Bach, and I just love that work. For so many reasons. I love the Passion story, and Bach did so much theology in his music, and it's also very interactive. I'm Lutheran, and in my church you actually still sing some of the hymns that he wrote for that Passion, which was how he intended it to be done, and it's just beautiful, and it just moves me.
Oh my God,
so
we're totally going to put a reference
Yes.
to that up on the Facebook page. Mollie, this has been so nice.
Thank you.
Mollie.
Thank you so much for taking the time today.
I wish we had longer.
I wish we had longer, and we'll all be watching very carefully next week when the IG's report comes out. I think you'll have a few sleepless nights, I think, next week.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was it from Ann Phelim, from the Ann Phelim Scoop for this week, and we'll be talking to you next week during this very exciting week, the IG's report coming out. Take care. Thank you so much.